Could the Nebraska Cornhuskers actually get booted from the Big Ten Conference? Well, I'm here to tell you it's actually a possibility because people at Nebraska are actually talking about it. I'm going to talk about it with you, give you my thoughts, and then let you know if they do get kicked out, where they would likely end up. And we're going to do that right after this word from my sponsor. Ladies and gentlemen, this episode is brought to you by Dutch Miller Automotive, where friends and family pricing means you get the best deal right up front on any new or pre-loved vehicle in stock every time. With brands like Chevrolet, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Kia, Hyundai, Ford, GMC, Buick, and Subaru, the Dutch Miller Automotive family is always growing and ready to put you in the car or truck you've been searching for. Check out our inventory across West Virginia at DutchMillerAuto.com or come in today to the home of friends and family pricing, only at a Dutch Miller Automotive store near you. What is up? Come on in, belly yourself up to the bar, and let me pour you out another shot of top shelf college football content on tap at Couz's Corner today. We're talking about conference realignment with the focus on Nebraska. I know I'm wearing a red shirt. It's total coincidence that I'm talking about Nebraska while wearing red. But I'm talking about Nebraska, who I haven't talked about in quite some time on the channel. But I found this story to be extremely interesting, and there's not a whole lot of people talking about it. I heard it from a good friend of the show, Mr. Greg Flugar, over at College Football Speak Around the Corner. He was the first one to talk about it. I wanted to kind of expand on it a little bit and talk more about not only the fact that they could leave the Big Ten or get kicked out, but where would they go if that happened? There's been a couple articles out talking about this subject. And in the first article, the current interim president of Nebraska, Mr. Chris Koborik, had some things to say when talking about Nebraska and how he's wanting to get them back into the AAU, which is American Association of Universities, which is a very prestigious group of universities who have a really high focus on research spending and among some other academic things too, but it's primarily based on research. Just for a quick brief history, when Nebraska got brought into the Big Ten back, 2010, 2011, somewhere in that time frame, they were actually an AAU member. As a matter of fact, they were one of the original members of AAU, something I learned from reading one of these articles. However, in 2011, they got booted out. They got expelled from the AAU because they weren't doing enough. They weren't doing what they needed to do to keep up with the requirements. In no time in history has any school ever been reinstated or invited back to the AAU after being kicked out. However, Nebraska is going to try to do that. But even bigger than the AAU thing, Nebraska is wanting to increase their research spending. And they're wanting to make a lot of other moves at the university level that would help them meet these AAU standards and also make the Big Ten happy because they are scared of getting booted from the league. And again, like Greg said, it's not him saying it. It's not me saying it. This is coming directly from people in leadership positions at Nebraska. Here's a quote from current interim president Chris Koborik in a recent article. He says, and I quote, "Whether we like it or not, college athletics is changing all the time. We don't know what college realignment will look like in 5 to 7 years. There's no guarantee that Nebraska will have a seat in the Big Ten. So we have to make sure we look like our peers," end quote. I'm going to read that last part again because it's key here. This is from an interim president. There's no guarantee that Nebraska will have a seat in the Big Ten, so we have to make sure we look like our peers, end quote. That's telling right there, and that's just one of many. And let's not forget, former AD Trev Alberts, who happens to be a Nebraska alum, just left Nebraska to go take the job at Texas A&M. What appears to be a lateral move from his alma mater. So what is going on at Nebraska? Something's going on at Nebraska that has people concerned. Now, in a recent article over at the Omaha World Herald and at omaha.com, which I'll leave a link to in the description box, former president, whose last name is Carter, who has actually left Nebraska and is now at Ohio State, but on his way out the door, he wrote a memo to the Board of Regents at Nebraska, sharing his concerns and some of the things he'd like to see Nebraska do to improve their academic standing and and keep their seat in the Big Ten. Now, I'm not going to read this to you. I'm just going to go over some key highlights and some key quotes from the article. But the first one I want to mention says this. It says, University of Nebraska-Lincoln has long badly lagged its Big Ten conference peers in key academic metrics like attracting coveted research grants. So much so there has even been talk it could one day lose its place in the prestigious athletic conference. So again, directly from the article at omaha.com. Now here's a direct quote from Carter, former President Carter. He says, bottom line, improvement in academic and research performance is imperative to our continued membership in the Big Ten. He used the word imperative there. That means important, needed, necessary. They're concerned. It's obvious they're concerned at Nebraska because they're lagging behind in research funding. And when you go look, they're way behind. They would be 17th out of 18 new Big Ten schools. The only school that would trail them in research spending would be Oregon. But with Oregon, they are still an AAU member. And with Oregon, even though they're not spending quite the amount of research dollars as Nebraska, they have increased their spending by a greater percentage. So Nebraska has their research spending is basically flat for the last few years, at least when you compare it to other schools. Even when you compare it to schools like Florida State and others who are rumored to be Big Ten candidates down the road. So take the AAU out of the equation. Just the research spending alone, which is a huge thing for the Big Ten, and I know a lot of people think it's hogwash. A lot of people think it's stupid, whatever. That doesn't change the fact it's important to these Big Ten university presidents, folks. You can say it's hogwash. You can say it's stupid. You can say it's elitist. I've been guilty of saying that myself. It doesn't matter what we think. We're not making the decisions. The Big Ten presidents are. Now, the article goes on to talk about Nebraska's history in the AAU, talked about how they got expelled, talks about how no university has ever been accepted back in after being expelled, or invited back in, I should say. And there's even a quote from a former Florida president who said, basically, AAU is a prestigious membership to have, and getting kicked out, you lose that prestige. And it means a lot to these universities and their leadership to have that prestige. Now, I'm going to read you another piece of this article. It says, UNL continues to lag on many key AAU metrics, most importantly, in the amount of research dollars it attracts. In 2022, UNL ranked 122nd nationally in federal research funding, competitive dollars that are highly sought after by universities. That put Nebraska-Lincoln 17th out of the 18 schools in the soon-to-be expanded Big Ten, ahead of only Oregon. Iowa, the next closest, was far above Nebraska at 55th, with nearly 3 times as much federal research funding. And here's another quote, and now this is the last quote I'm going to read from the article, but here's another quote from former President Carter. He says, to lose our membership would be devastating. As such, proactive steps must be taken to rectify our deficiencies. And he's talking about losing membership in the Big Ten would be devastating. Why? Number one, from an academic perspective, you lose that prestige. You lose the sharing of all of those Big Ten resources. But even more importantly, it could be a massive, massive financial blow to not only your university academically, but from an athletics standpoint. Look at the TV revenue. The Big Ten is going to have the highest TV revenue of any conference in America. 80 to 90 million a year per team, they're estimating. Who wants to lose that kind of money? But even more important to the presidents, they don't want to lose that prestige of being in the Big Ten. Now, when watching Greg's show the other day, a live stream about this, a lot of people in the chat were talking about, hey, maybe the Big 12 can nab Nebraska if they get kicked out of the Big Ten, or maybe they'll even have an interest in rejoining the Big 12. And look, yes, on the surface, it sounds great. They would be a great cultural fit. They're a former member of the Big 12. No doubt they'd be a fit there. But guys, that's pie in the sky. We all know that's not happening. At least it's extremely, extremely unlikely. Now, if Nebraska does get booted from the Big Ten and the Big 12 is our only option, then yes, I could see it being a possibility. And yes, I could see the Big 12 potentially getting a better TV deal in 2031 for having Nebraska in the league. But it's still not going to come anywhere close to the Big Ten's deal. Not even close. So to me, if I'm Nebraska, you know what I'm doing? I'm calling the SEC. Why not? Think about it. Nebraska, despite all the struggles Nebraska has had on the football field the past 10 to 20 years, they're still a blue blood program. When you look at the blue blood rankings, they're a top 10 university. They're 8th, as a matter of fact. They're still a blue blood. And they'd fit in perfect with the Oklahomas and the Texases. As a matter of fact, they're former conference mates of those schools. You'd get some rivalries back in the SEC with Nebraska. They'd fit right in with the Alabamas, the Georgias. Nebraska has an extremely passionate fan base. They would fit closely with the SEC. It's a blue-collar state. Just a great cultural fit, in my opinion, with the SEC. And it may not fit geographically, but neither does Texas. Neither does Oklahoma. And definitely Missouri doesn't fit. And here's another thing that's intriguing about Nebraska. We've all heard, or most of us have heard, how the SEC, when they look at expansion candidates, they look at new markets, which Nebraska fits, and B, they look at teams that are located in contiguous states. Nebraska is a contiguous state to Missouri. It's barely contiguous, but it does touch it. So it fits in. To me, it checks every box of an SEC school. Their stadium holds over about 90,000 or more people. They sell out almost every game. They're still a blue blood. It'd be great football games. And they would only be taking a very slight pay cut, maybe $5 to $10 million a year, ballpark, versus going to the Big 12, where they would have to take a 30, 40, 50 million a year pay cut. And the university wouldn't have to jump through all these hoops to try to get back into AAU, because the Big 10, the SEC, even though they're starting to put a little bit more focus on academics, it seems, with their latest conference editions, it's not as high a priority for the SEC to have all this research funding. Most of the schools in the SEC would be ranked closer to where Nebraska ranks. At least a lot of them would, in research funding. So to me, Nebraska is a perfect fit for the SEC. And maybe it's a prestige thing for the president of the university wanting to be part of the Big Ten, part of that elite, prestigious group of universities. But man, what's wrong with Alabama? What's wrong with Florida, Oklahoma, Texas? Some great schools in that conference, man. What's wrong with South Carolina, Georgia? I don't understand. Mississippi State, Ole Miss. Yeah, they don't have that prestigious academic AAU and all this other stuff beside their name, but they're giving away, people are earning valuable degrees from there. I started to say giving out, but people are earning them. People are earning valuable degrees from those schools. They're good institutions. They just have different missions. There's nothing wrong with that. Nebraska, wisen up. Stop trying to keep up with the Joneses. Call Greg Sankey and say, look, can we get in your conference? That's all you got to do. And I almost guarantee you you could get in. And think about ESPN. You think ESPN wouldn't want Nebraska in the SEC if they could get them? Holy cow, they'd love to have Nebraska. One of the most valuable brands in America. They'd be crazy not to at least make the effort. And if you're the Big Ten, then get Florida State, maybe get Clemson, get somebody else, a school that fits closer to your research requirements and all this other stuff. Maybe Miami, whoever it is, Virginia, North Carolina, whatever, to try to make up for the loss of value you're losing in Nebraska. There's ways to do it. There's ways to make it work. And that's what I recommend Nebraska to do, is try to get in the SEC. What do you think? First of all, do you think Nebraska is going to end up getting kicked out of the Big Ten? Personally, I think it's a long shot, but possible. And if they do you think they should try to get in the SEC, or should they try to go back to the Big 12? I want to hear your thoughts. I want to give a shout out right now to my VIP members of the day, and they are Denny Allen, David Cummings, Outlaw of College Football, who, by the way, has his own great channel. Go check it out. And Luke Bart. If you want to become a member of this prestigious VIP club, hit the join button below. If you don't see a join button, go to my channel homepage. Right beside my profile picture is a join button. Hit that. It tells you the different levels available, tells you the perks. I'm starting to put up a lot more members-only content, folks. I plan on putting up a new members-only video here in the next day or two. You can only have access to that if you're a VIP member. It's not that much. It's $2.99 a month or $4.99 a month, depending on what level you pick. Also, if you want to support your favorite student athletes, check out the Honest Athlete link in my description box. Buy yourself some collectible Honest Athlete trading cards. The athletes get 60% of the profits. I'll make a small commission, so you'll be supporting my work here and be supporting the student athletes at your favorite university. They do have West Virginia available if you're a West Virginia fan. I think Nebraska's available if you're a Nebraska fan watching this. But anyway, go to honestathlete.com, links in the description, and see if your school is available. You can check out this video right here. It's another video regarding conference realignment. This one related to Notre Dame. Go check it out. I appreciate you tuning into this episode. Have a top shelf day. And don't forget, as always, whether you like West Virginia or not, Q Country Roads.